This part is about the bevel modifier, and the bevel modifier takes the edges of your mesh and sort of files them. So now they're not that sharp anymore, but that chamfered. And the bevel modifier has very few settings, which is good for me because I don't have to explain so much. So first of all, the width slider, I guess that's fairly self-explanatory. It is the width of how much your beveled edges or your edges are being filed or beveled. Then there's a nice button, only vertices. That's pretty cool because you can sort of make a triangle out of each of these vertices and then use that to basically file your corners. And then there's the limit methods. It's not much use to use the angle method on a cube because all the angles here are 90%, so we'll get to that in a bit. I'll use the weight limitation, and right now it doesn't make any difference because I haven't set any weights. So I'll go into edit mode and set this to edge, and then you can see up here, if you press N, you get this menu. Up here you see the mean bevel weight, and let's put the mean bevel weight of this to 1, and you can see it's working again. So our bevel modifier is only using those edges whose weight is bigger than 1, and you can see there's a difference between 0 and 1, and it's gradual. So if I put this roughly around 0.5, and let's put this roughly around 0.2, then we can see there's 3 different beveled edges. Now these 2 options here, they only apply to where 2 edges meet. If I set this to sharpest, you can see that it's jumping a little bit. But if these 2 bevel weights are the same, there is no difference between sharpest, average, and largest, because, as I said, these values only apply to where 2 edges meet. So let's have a look at where they meet. Let's start with average. Average means that this part here will get a beveling of 0.75, coming from the 0.5 of this and the 1 of this. So 1 plus 0.5 is 1.5, and divided by 2, 0.75. If I use sharpest, this is a bit confusing, at least to me. Sharpest means the one with the lowest beveled weight, so the one that's still sharpest. So once you increase the bevel weight, it's not sharp anymore, so sharpest meaning the lower value will have full control over this corner. Largest is the opposite. So if I use sharpest here, let's make this a little more impressive, the difference. If I use sharpest, for this corner only the bevel weight of 0.2 will be taken into account. If I use largest, the bevel weight of 1 will be taken into account. So that's the manual bevel weight. Let's have a look at the last option, the angle limitation. So I'll add a bevel modifier again, and just to show this a little better, I'm going to make a real old-fashioned cylinder out of this, not using B-mesh. So E to extrude, Alt-M at center, and we have an old-fashioned cylinder. I'll set this to smooth, and if I increase the bevel weight here, you can see that there are sort of weird things happening around the edges. And the reason for that is Blender will try to bevel every edge, including those. And this is of course an edge that should not be beveled, so I'll put an angle limitation to it. And with that you can see that only edges that have an angle of more than 30 degrees will get beveled. If I put this down to 0 again, you see that Blender will try to bevel these edges as well, resulting in something very weird. So for a complex mesh, I usually use an angle limitation bevel, but I am actually not too fond of the bevel modifier because it screws up UVs. And if you UV unwrap something and then use the bevel modifier will be calculated after the unwrapping, and that will result in some very, very weird edges. So I'll only use the bevel modifier with procedural textures, that works. And there is of course an alternative. If I go into edit mode over here, select this loop, you just have to select an edge. Doesn't matter if it's an entire loop, I'll use an entire loop. Press W, you can see here bevel. You can also press Ctrl B apparently. And now if I move my mouse, you can see the beveling effect. And this way it's very, very easy to limit this to certain edges, and keep in mind to do that before you UV unwrap. So that's it about the bevel modifier. Fairly simple modifier, fairly dangerous if you're using UV unwrapping. And there is another method to use it. So, hope you learned something. See you next time.